grateful for your love. We're grateful for your mercy and your grace. For those of us that have received it, God, may we live like it. May we walk worthy of it. For those that haven't, may they see it. And those of us that have, I pray that you would oversee the proceedings here as decisions are made for the betterment of our community. We thank you for our leaders that serve, those elected, those that are paid, and all that they do to make this community a bright place for us to live, raise our children and our grandchildren. For that we're grateful. In Jesus' name.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is the approval of the agenda.
Mayor and members of the board, I would like to ask that you remove item or ordinance B 2329 from the agenda. If you remember at our last meeting when we went through the our tax levy public hearing, we said that we would be getting new numbers today. We did get those numbers and there was a change. So we will start that process over and advertise for another public hearing and 2 reads at our next board meeting.
Is that the only change then?
Yes, sorry.
I'll entertain a motion then to remove Bill B 23-29 from tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Skinner. I have a second.
Second.
Second, Alderman Bray. Any discussion on amending the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay. Agenda is amended. Seeing no proclamations, we'll move on to public comment. We ask the citizens come forward to the podium and microphone and give your name and address for the record, and there should be a sign-in sheet as well. Anyone who wishes to address the board this evening?
My name is Jan Brill. I live at 1035 Ephraim. I come before you tonight to thank the city council, the committee for the fair, and the mayor for a wonderful fair that we had. Also, Green Valley Democrats has been at the fair, I think, for 4 times now. And we have a kind of catch your eye, pin the issue tail on the donkey. And we were organized enough to take a picture this year.
No.
And I wanted to report the results. As people came by our booth, we said, do you have an issue that is important to you? We gave them some choices. If they had a choice that wasn't on our list, we made a little donkey tail for it and put it up there. We had 116 tails put on our donkey. 27 different issues were chosen. I thought that was kind of remarkable. The issue that got the most requests was education. I think in 3 out of the 4 years we've done the issue donkey, education has been on the top of the list of priorities for the people who came to the fair. So we wanted to thank you. I think our fair is something that our city should be very proud of. I don't have any idea how much work goes into it, but I'm sure it's 100 times more than I think. And so we thank you for giving us this community event. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to address the board? Do we stop it or do we just do it now? Do we have more time? Do we just go ahead and?
Yeah.
Was it a vote? Is that what we?
The motion, yeah.
Motion? Oh,
Motion
so
and-
moved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second, Alderman. All right. All in favor, please have to vote on or just
I think somebody just has to.
make the motion. All right, you're good.
My name is Corianne Ryan. My address is 2118 Northwest Hedgewood Drive, Green Valley. My husband and I own Green Valley News, and I recently served as volunteer coordinator with Green Valley Fair to take this opportunity to publicly thank Chief Turner and the Grand Valley Police officers who assisted us during Saturday's parade. I am in awe of their ability to remain calm in stressful situations, and I'm going to do my best to channel some of their calm this evening. Following the parade on Saturday, I was working on posting photos to our Facebook page and noticed a comment on a community page regarding the parade. The commenter, who I know is a fellow business owner in the city and spoke to both before and after the parade, expressed dismay that there was not a flag presentation during the parade. If the individual had reached out to me by phone, email, or via social media, I would have let her know that it was an unintentional oversight, and I would have been happy to express my regret and make a statement to that effect. But that was not how this person chose to address the situation. Knowing how quickly conversations on this particular group evolve into name-calling, uninformed gossip, and general unmoderated stupidity, I decided to post the following response. I try to refrain from commenting in this group, but feel compelled to respond as the volunteer parade coordinator. I cannot speak to why the ROTC did not present the flags today. It was assumed they would do so, and we placed them at the front of the parade as in years past for this reason. Regardless, we appreciate their participation in the parade and their participation in the ROTC program. There was certainly no intention on the part of the volunteer parade organizer, or I am certain any participant in today's parade, to not include the American, state, or any new flag. I find it truly unfortunate that it was decided to take an opportunity to publicly raise the absence of the flag at a parade as some lack of patriotism or stir up controversy for some other purpose, when a simple question to the organizers could suffice. While a flag presentation may have been missing at this morning's parade, what I know I saw were 40-plus groups expending time, money, and energy to celebrate community and illustrate quite tangibly what the flag itself represents. As someone who has worked in the nonprofit field for 20-plus years and devoted time to countless volunteer efforts, I'm certainly not surprised that people choose to take opportunities such as this to create controversy. But I'm saddened that it diminishes from what was a truly great community event, brimming with community pride and patriotism. Green Valley News stepped in to coordinate the parade 3 years ago when other groups failed to do so. We are proud to devote our resources and time towards this effort and are excited to share 100% of the parade entry fees this year with the Green Valley Assistance Council. While I'm very tired after a busy day, I'm proud of the event and the many groups that participated. And we will gladly continue to volunteer to coordinate the parade because we know that intentional participation and service in one's community is just as important as the display of a flag. As expected on that abomination of a Facebook group, responses and subsequent messages have suggested I am not a true American, unpatriotic, woke, whatever that stupid slur is supposed to mean, and that it must have been an intentional act on my part. One person claimed that my actions offended a Vietnam-era veteran, which I take very personally. The trolls on Facebook who claim to know about my patriotism or political leanings wouldn't know that my father was a combat medic in Vietnam and earned 2 Purple Hearts during his service. And he taught me what it truly means to be a patriotic American. He also taught me to be wary of folks who wrap themselves up in the flag and claim to be the arbiters of what makes someone a true American. I thought my response was fairly clear, but I understand that critical thinking is a challenge for people on social media. And a lack of critical thinking on the part of an alderman is what brings me here this evening. Late Saturday evening, Alderman Arnold decided to message me on my personal Facebook profile to express his opinion about my response. In his response, he stated, "Just read your comments and felt it was a little off base to pass blame to the ROTC on an assumption that they were to bring the flags without it being clear. I know you put many hours in and hard work to get all this organized, but you tainted that by your comments on Facebook. You should have accepted, let me get it right. You should have accepted and noted it was an oversight and that it would be addressed in future events and let it be." There were quite a few responses I mulled over, but I settled on responding to Alderman Arnold by stating, "Thank you for sharing your opinion." After 5 years of running a local community news site, I've received plenty of commentary from political figures and have learned to brush it off. But I come here tonight out of concern for future community volunteers. Alderman Arnold, it is not your place to share your paternalistic comments with a volunteer of an event you have no involvement in. You may be disappointed in my response, but I'm equally disappointed that you feel empowered to share feedback with a volunteer you have no authority over and invade their personal social media space. It was a pleasure to organize the Green Valley Fair Community Parade the past 3 years, and I am grateful to all of the participants, volunteers, and city staff who made the event a success. While I will no longer be serving in this volunteer role, it is clear that there are plenty of willing experts on parades whether they be aldermen or authorities on patriotism on Facebook, who I am certain will jump right in and volunteer their time and energy to serve in this role. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to address the board? All right. Seeing none, move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I have Mr. Alderman Skinner to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Knox. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right. Seeing no previous business, new business, move on to presentations. We have a comprehensive plan of Parks Master Plan from Confluence.
Let me do that. Okay, excuse in
It's
advance
good for the
any,
recording later.
any large noises.
If you prefer.
Oh no, let's see here.
He's
Usually just.
admit it now.
Hey,
There you go.
all right. Consultant did one thing right. My name is Christopher Shires, principal with Confluence, your consultant lead, hired by the city to create both a new comprehensive plan as well as a new Parks and Rec master plan. So tonight, we're going to give you a brief presentation of both plans. I will first talk about the comprehensive plan, and then Hank behind me, also with Confluence, will give you a presentation on the Parks and Rec plan. Both of which have been presented and accepted and approved by your prospective boards. So let's kick this off. I will go very briefly, but should you have a question, something you want me to go into greater detail, please tell me to slow down or ask a question. But otherwise, we know you have plenty on your agenda. So for this, I'm gonna run through just a quick recap of the project scope and schedule, how we got here. Talk at a high level about how we went out to get public input and feedback. And then, of course, review those draft chapters, and then really, if there was any questions. And so this was broken into a 4-phase process, and here we are at the very, very end, our last meeting at phase 4. This is about a year long, so kind of a typical schedule for getting both the parks plan done as well as a comprehensive plan, a good joint effort. So in the final phase on August 9th, we took it to the Planning Commission where they did adopt the comprehensive plan, and then on August 15th, took it to your Parks and Rec Board, where they also, after a public hearing, public meeting, adopted the plan. So it's before you tonight to really acknowledge that these plans are ready for your acceptance. So a little bit on the public feedback, we used a lot of different tools, one being a large professional survey by ETC here in Kansas City, so a statistically valid survey, had strong response at over 400 respondents. We had our online engagement website that not only sought input for the plan, but also provided drafts of both plans for folks to review and comment. We had a public workshop to gain input early on in the process, and then a public open house to review both plan documents. For the comprehensive plan, we broke it into several sections. There's an introduction, why we plan, what's its purpose, how it's used. Planning outside the lines, that's the major component, the land use plan. Of course, then there's planning for housing, transportation, economic development, infrastructure and utilities, and then the implementation section on how we get there. There are an appendix, so the plan document itself is not quite so thick. Just in case you're kind of curious, it's yay thick if you printed out a copy. But there is the appendix of their existing conditions analysis we completed, our public engagement summary, and then that ETC survey, which has quite a lot of very valuable data. And so for that first chapter that's very critical, planning outside the lines, that's that land use analysis. So existing land use considerations, and really then that all-important future land use map, which is the basis for a lot of future planning, investment, as well as how we zone as the city continues to grow and evolve. And so when we look at your existing land uses within the city limits, no surprise, single-family residential in yellow is one of the largest categories, but there's a good healthy mix of other land use types, such as commercial, industrial, multifamily, residential. We also worked on updating the city's planning boundary. In contrast to your last plan, we did retract on the north end and the south end to deal with some limitations on sewer and infrastructure expansion, really reflecting what we heard from the community. And then, of course, there's an existing sewer agreement and kind of a logical boundary on our west side. And then the east, we did plan out to basically Oak Grove's planning boundary, as there are some areas in there that we think are very advantageous for Green Valley to have within your jurisdiction. As a part of that land use planning, we did work with the committee, your steering committee, as well as your board, on what is the right mix of housing types. Right now, you are almost 90% single-family residential. Thought it would be valuable to not alter dramatically, but try to increase the amount of, say, multifamily housing in key areas in the city, mainly in areas within the growth boundary. And then from that, we estimate the number of acres of different land uses needed in each category. We did plan beyond those needed numbers to the 2050 horizon year, but it's important in land use planning that we don't plan to the minimums, leaving lots of room for flexibility and let market forces kind of drive where we head. So similar to that existing land use map, the future land use map, we use a lot of different colors by land use categories, and we did develop a whole new list for you, and they hopefully kind of mean what they sound like. So ag, open space, farmland, open space, low density residential in yellow, again, think single family homes generally, medium density, think townhomes, row houses, high density in brown, think apartments, neighborhood commercial, a lower scale commercial, regional commercial, that's typically what we're pushing out to the highways or our large retail areas. Mixed use, that's where we think whether it's traditional mixed use building, first floor retail, upper floors office residential, or a horizontal mixed use development where it's a planned development that includes a mix of uses, apartments, commercial, office, in a cohesive development, and then a special district just to deal with downtown. In blue there is things owned by the school district, the county, the city. Parks and recreation, different than open space, it's programmed rec space. And then business park, also could think of that as a light industrial or industrial. Okay, so with that, we colored up a new future land use map. But again, you'll notice our largest land use category in this case is still single family residential. The one thing I would note, since there's a lot of floodplain to the east into this kind of planning boundary that we wanted to recognize, that open space ag land percentage did go up quite a bit, but it has a lot to do with all the floodplain, say, around Monkey Mountain and the county's own park. But we did strategically locate in some of those growth areas land for new retail development, multifamily development, and mixed-use development. And then one of the big things is out by Stillhouse and Leffel's, thinking what would be the right land use categories around a future interchange with I-70, and that's that large area in red. Okay, and if I zoom in, sure, happy to go through any key details, but on the north end of note at Buckner Tarsney and East Pink Hill Road is the potential for another kind of commercial retail residential center. And same thing on the south end, just more opportunities to kind of fill in, otherwise maintaining a lot of those existing single family areas and how they can fill out with more single family. So trying to strike a balance between those increased land values those increased densities and property values that help pay our tax bills, yet still having areas for single family residential. And then of note again, that large blue area kind of north and east of Monkey Mountain along I-70, that's a potential interchange location at some point, and that would be a high value interchange for commercial and business park development. So we have areas highlighted there in blue and red within some higher density residential uses kind of spilling off from there. And so a real opportunity for the community long term, realizing that it will take time before that interchange can be approved. Any questions on the land use map before I move on?
What areas were low density residential that you've changed to high density or medium density?
So at a high level, Are you talking from the current or the previously adopted comprehensive plans, future land use map?
Right.
So in general, that area north of the interchange at I-70, so north along, say, Leffels, on up to, and now I'm totally blanking on the east-west street that's right to the north there. I point with my laser pointer, but it won't show. And then the other one, although in the current future land use plan or the previously adopted one, we did have areas north, say, East Pink Hill Road, that were for some type of commercial multifamily development. We did expand that area following along the river, kind of south and east of Buckner Tarsney, just south of Pink Hill Road.
So what's
That's
the
primary changes?
and what's the definition of medium density residential?
So think row houses, townhomes. In general, you might have somebody living in front or back or to the side of you, but not something stacked like an apartment, somebody living above or below you.
Okay.
So generally think duplex, townhome, row house, something like that. Or twoplex, fourplex, sixplex.
So why would we take area that was before set aside for low density residential and change it to that type of?
Yeah, great question. So when we had the community input and we did our analysis, there are missing middle housing types. Not everyone can afford or wants to be in a single family home. There was demand for whether it's owner occupied or a rental product for a townhome row house, something that could be with association maintenance. You're not having to mow your lawn. In some cases can be a more affordable unit, whether you're a senior or just a new family starting out. So it's not everywhere in town, but we're trying to locate it in some key areas. Now, from a zoning standpoint, it doesn't mean that somebody couldn't come in and say, I'd like to be zoned one layer down. In fact, I'll show a chart of that in a little bit. So if somebody said, yeah, I see you have it for townhomes, but I think I'd rather build single family homes, that is still a potential. But so this is trying to reflect the market demands, what we're seeing, some of the community wants, yet still identifying lots of area for single family residential. The other thing we generally think is single family has a little more trouble paying the tax bills, where those higher density residential uses tend to pay a little bit better in taxes or return to the city on kind of a per acre or per square foot basis.
Yeah, I just have concerns with some of the areas where it's medium density that we're putting these in very far away from the city center, right? To me, it seems like the want from, you're talking about like what the new person out of college is looking for and stuff is probably not an apartment, 5, 6, 7 miles away from like the city center where everything's at. And so I'm very familiar with that north side where a lot of this property's at, and that doesn't seem like a good place to me for duplexes, apartment buildings, and stuff like that.
Yeah, and a little bit, and that's a great comment. And so a little bit of trying to build its own little city center. We call this nodal planning, so it's not all just in one spot in town where you have different development nodes and areas. It's kind of a typical development pattern we see in the Kansas City metro. But that purple mixed use can then start creating those retail centers from which then this housing builds off of. And it was really looking for opportunities, knowing that we tend to get a lot of pushback when we try to increase densities nearby an existing developed neighborhood. And so if we plan out into the future, we sometimes can see a little less neighborhood pushback. Normally, if some of the higher density stuff occurs first, the infill single family tends to be less concerned with it. It's the fear of change versus the fear of known that tends to be a little more challenging sometimes in development.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I just personally think there's way too much medium density up there.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. Part of it is also trying to put some flexibility in the marketplace, knowing that not every property owner wants to sell or landowner wants to sell, and not everyone is going to want to develop, say, with townhomes. And so in this case, they know they could go down one layer, say, to single family residential. So it's to try to make some more offerings out there. Anything else you want me to go over or talk about? Okay. Let me skip on to the relationship back to zoning. So one thing and we went through this with your planning commission, is creating this land use zoning compatibility matrix. And so we had all those land use categories in the plan and on the future land use map. And then along the left-hand column, we list all the city's zoning districts. And so then this is a guide for, say, the planning commission when somebody comes in and either it's newly annexed land or some development project and they request a rezoning, they can look at this and in this case see that we may have a medium density residential land use category, and what are all those zoning districts that would be compatible or PC partially compatible could be approved. And you see all the single family and kind of medium densities are the true compatible ones. And so all those districts can line up. Over time, this table will change as you make amendments or updates to your zoning code and frankly, a little bit even personal preference. So this chapter does have goals, as do most of the chapters. So I'm going to highlight them really quick here. So promote a mix of development, balanced development, best practices and growth, and then want that new quality development and infill development that's good for the community. Any questions before I run through housing next? All right. So there is a chapter on housing, existing conditions analysis. That's also where we came up with that target mix. So here's a little bit of that math where we're trying to show the percentages. So we talked about that mix of say 75, 74%, single family, typical residential, that land use categories, they do color up to that about. So we're trying to be consistent with that future land use map. And then in this chapter, we also had some main goals about trying to attract quality development to meet the needs of the current future residents. Again, some of those best practices for a neighborhood. There's some different specific policies related to that, and then supporting a variety of needs. Transportation chapter, another good chapter. A lot of comments on this. We discussed the railroad at great length throughout all of this. So there's that analysis again, and then the goals and policies and action items. So we created a future streets plan. Again, we're showing in a big orange circle there that potential interchange in I-70 being very important, and then connecting roads to and through it, and kind of continuing throughout the community. The sidewalk network was another important one. Your city staff had just completed a really great sidewalk gap analysis, so we're able to kind of build off on that and even infill with some existing trails that are in the works, or existing trails that are in the works, and then future trail opportunities. And this coincides with the Parks and Rec master plan. And then some basic transportation strategies, including some language discussing the railroad and its impact long-term. No easy fix today though. But then of course the I-70 interchange and even another potential crossing of I-70 at the future on the east side of our planning boundary. And it has even a longer series of goals and a lot of action items and policies that follow these. So maintaining a lot of them are kind of logical, but we like to state those in the plan. Maintaining our existing infrastructure, expanding our road network in all directions, integrating active transportation. It's another way to say not just for cars, we want bikes and people to move too. Coordinate with all of our partners and enhance our sense of identity through intersection treatments and things you've been considering and working on over time. And then lastly here for economic development, same kind of a format. We do our analysis, we have our public feedback, and then those kind of policy considerations. And so for downtown being a very key one, really looking at preserving the corridor, being careful with any kind of street improvement not to hurt the downtown. We know that railroad crossings are a really big deal. And then looking at, can we expand a little bit to the south and to the west with the downtown area, yet protect that existing single-family neighborhood? And then from a larger regional look of the different key opportunities, areas again, for example, the interchange at I-70. And then of course, their goals, policies, action items, the big goals being downtown, encourage that industrial growth to help balance our tax bill and expand job opportunities. And then lastly, infrastructure, really kind of a recap of a lot of planning that your staff has already been doing, looking at water, sewer, sanitary sewer, and then of course private infrastructure. And then This helps shape where we can and can't serve with infrastructure, helps shape that ultimate planning boundary. Knowing where with our stormwater improvements needed, water expansion needed, as well as some sanitary sewer extensions. And again, kind of the standard set of goals here, maintain that high level of service, expand the network as necessary, and then continuing on those good regional partnerships. And then implementation is really the recap of all of this, one-stop summary with those goals and action steps to achieve those goals, as well as a recap of those policies that can be pointed to when making a decision or recommendation. And I'll just kind of show, there's a nice table that kind of shows that time frame, priority, and who might be responsible for it. And also, one thing I would note, for the KC Communities for All, we did use a little their logo throughout the plan whenever we were accomplishing or acknowledging one of those priorities. Okay, any questions on the comp plan before we go to parks?
Just so I'm clear, so currently, as of today, we're 89% single family.
Of the developed territory, right?
And this comprehensive plan wants to move that to 74%.
In essence, 74, 75. Now, what it ultimately develops sure could range less than that. We could see a lot more single-family development should that be what the market factors are. So the plan would allow for up to 75%.
But it sets the zoning for these, for the future annexed in property based off what this comprehensive plan says.
Yep, and
So there'd have to be a change in zoning.
no. So you could still zone, if the property owner and the city were to decide, you could still zone those areas identified as medium density for single-family development.
Yeah, one piece of confusion maybe, with this map, this is not the zoning map, this is just the future land use map. So the zoning document is completely separate, so anytime a parcel is annexed into the city, you have to go through the zoning process for P&Z and the board and establish zoning for that. This is the overall, like, if you have a magic wand, this is how we would like to develop these properties based off of this plan, but it does not establish zoning on any of those properties. And it's why the process is a little different for adopting the plan as well. That's why it's truly adopted at the Planning and Zoning Commission level, because it is a plan. It's not actually establishing set zoning for any parcel.
Yeah, and again, we can talk about it later. I know there's a resolution for it, so.
It is a guiding document, I should be very clear on that. This is not law, and so it's really providing a guide, and of which the guide, again, in that medium density category, hey, look, it's actually working. The laser pointer works on the screen now. The single-family zoning districts are one of those compatible districts. So those areas could potentially be zoned one of those districts versus some of the higher density districts.
You had a slide earlier in the beginning that showed like what it is now, what your prediction for, growth for people, like 2023 and all that. Can you go back to that slide?
Let me make sure. This one? Yeah.
Okay.
So if we do some of our population projections, now the screen's too light. We could see some dramatic population growth in the future, all things kept the same. And I think that's very reasonable, very likely to occur as we march forward. We just kind of look at our neighbors and see the continued progression of the KC growth east along I-70. And so to have all that housing available, this is kind of that breaks into some land use categories.
So your projection, or what you're kind of saying, is future 75% single, 15% tax single, and up to 10% multifamily.
Yeah. And really the big change in your land use category is really suggesting, do you want to go a little bit farther on multifamily residential? Now again, it's a guide. This is a partnership, as you know, with zoning between property owner and city, really both sides needing to agree that that's what they want to do. Because just like with the multifamily, they could pick another zoning district. In fact, what I'd say is if somebody submits a proposal that you really like, that doesn't perfectly match the comp plan future land use map, well, you're going to want to amend that. And that's what we also talked to the planning commission. right, Parks and Rec Master Plan now. Send it forward, Hank will go through all that. It'll be a little shorter. I don't know, I didn't want to go over it, all right. Okay. Good evening, Hank Myers with Confluence, Associate Principal. My focus was on the Parks and Rec Master Plan side of things. Want to run through just the outline of the Parks and Rec Master Plan. We've got the introduction, understanding of the community's vision. So really, what was the feedback that we got from the community all through the ETC surveys, the online surveys, the public input, in-person meetings. Looking at planning and maintenance and improvements. So we did go through each and every single one of your facilities, did a facilities inventory report for each of those, looked at the conditions of the various amenities within there, and also looked at what the opportunities and recommendations were for each of those facilities. Those individual facility reports are included as part of the Appendix B is the parks inventories. And then ultimately, we took the feedback that we got and the conditions and what we saw and started to make recommendations for individual improvements that could occur over time within your individual facilities in the planning and implementation side of things. As part of this, and Chris kind of touched on this earlier, we did extensive public input. Some of the highest level recommendation or things that we heard from the public that they wanted to see were really paved trails, indoor recreation center, more recreational programs, improvements to those sports fields and ball complexes, nature trails, and then neighborhood parks. And the focus, again, and we see this in almost every community that we go into, is that trails are really one of the top priorities. They want to see that connectivity throughout the community. And those are some of the highest voted on amenities that we really wanted to hear. We also heard that there were courts and playgrounds that needed some attention, and then just also some of the rec programs. And then, again, what would really improve the quality of life? People's top priorities were trails. So we know that that's a high priority. And Chris kind of touched on the connectivity that's already within the city. But also there's a future trails map in here that also outlines what those recommendations are and also ties in with the Metro Green recreational trail connectivity plan. Again, when we took the image summary out to vote, some of the highest voted on results that we saw from the community where people really wanted a farmer's market, they wanted some indoor tournament spaces, they wanted public restrooms and a dog park, nature center, more inclusive playgrounds. So as we get into this, there's some recommendations in there as far as percentage of playgrounds within the community and your parks and how many of those should be fully inclusive. More community parks and playgrounds, and then just really neighborhood parks. Again, as part of this, we also went through and did a level of service mapping. There's also some overall looking at the population totals that Chris kind of touched on earlier. And you start to see, based on a level of service, we like to be at about 10.5 acres per 1,000 residents. As it stands right now, you're currently very underserved by community and neighborhood level parks. And really to the point where you're at about a 5.3 acres per 1,000 level right now. So there's some strategies in there as well that really start to outline how do we get the level of service that we need to as far as total number of acres within the community at that echelon that we really want to be at there. As we start to look at this, based on those future population totals, neighborhood level parks needed by and acres by 2050 is approximately 76 additional acres of land for neighborhood level parks. Neighborhood level parks are typically in that 5 to 12 acre range as far as acreage per park. And then you get into community level parks. By 2050, you need approximately 264 additional acres, which Chris has kind of outlined in that future land use plan. So really, by the time you hit 2050, you need approximately 346 additional acres of land to really serve the community based on what national standards would typically tell a community and what those standards are nationwide. again, as far as implementation, we start to break down the recommendations within each of those into those community centers and programs, the shared use path recommendations based on the priority that the community has set for those. What is the parkland dedication ordinance, which I'll touch on here in a minute. That's how we start to acquire some of this additional parkland to help serve the community. That also touches on ADA accessibility within some of your parks. That was one of the areas that we felt like needed the most attention within your current facilities. And then how do we update the play elements, and how do we identify these facilities? How do we make sure that when the public comes out to these facilities, they're unmistakable that these are a Green Valley Parks facility? And then how do we extend the park stays for residents within the community? Chris kind of touched on the trails plan. You can kind of see it here. We further broke it down into priority zones. So long-term priorities, so the farthest out, with the magenta color, that near-term priority being the highest rated priority for the community there.
Sorry.
And then we also identified where the existing trailheads were and where we felt like there were some proposed trailheads that could be added fairly easily to really provide a lot of connectivity to the community. Within here, I mentioned the parkland dedication ordinance. So as a parcel is developed in the future, we would recommend that you take this into account where you adopt a dedication ordinance. And that helps us to get to that 10.5 acres per 1,000 residents service level that we really want to get to. And the way we would recommend breaking that down is understanding that that 10 acres per 1,000 residents breaks down to about 0.01 acres per resident. And if you start to look at the number of dwellings within a new development, you would assume on average about 2.7 residents per dwelling within that housing chart, which gives you the total acres that would be recommended within those facilities. So example, on a 100-acre lot and the 2.7 acres of parkland for those 100 lots, that's pretty small. So one of the alternatives that we would recommend is if it's not above like a 5-acre parcel, that you look at a cash in lieu of option to accept and put that towards parkland future areas, or acquiring a larger parcel of land that can really serve the community. And really that breaks down into a cash value per acre recommendation. So if they are required to dedicate 2.7 acres, you'd find out what the per acre value is of land in the area and apply that as their dedication. Any questions on any of that?
Questions? Huh?
That's it.
I think that's it for our presentation. We're both happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Anyone have any questions regarding either part? All right. Thank you for everything on it.
Yeah, thanks.
See no additional presentations, move on to public hearing. We have the Title 4 of the Code of Ordinances be amended in Chapter 425 to remove medical marijuana facilities and change it to comprehensive marijuana facilities pursuant to the Missouri Constitution being amended.
Mayor, members of the board, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Trozen.
Current members of the board, Chapter 400 is the zoning regulations. This is Section 425 of that particular section in the zoning ordinance, and therefore a public hearing is required. The mayor had indicated in November 2022 election, Missouri voters approved an amendment to the Missouri Constitution, Section 2 through Amendment 3, legalizing recreational marijuana. In order to implement the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services rules and Amendment 3, the city needs to amend Chapter 425 and remove the reference to medical and replace it with comprehensive. Public notice was given in the Examiner on Saturday, August 26, 2023. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on August 9th, 2023, and recommends approval of the proposed Chapter 425 amendment to the Board of Aldermen. Any questions?
All right, any questions? This is a public hearing. We'll open it up to the public to speak regarding it. Is there anyone who wishes to speak regarding this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. No discussion. We'll move on to resolutions. First resolution is R 23-64. A resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley adopting the 2050 Comprehensive Plan and the 2050 Park Master Plan.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution R 23-64.
Got a motion by Alderman Knox to approve resolution R 23-64. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Alderman Arnold. Any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, this is based on the public or the presentation that we just had. Essentially with the comprehensive plan by state statute, it is adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission and then can be accepted by the Board of Aldermen. That did take place at the Planning and Zoning Commission level. So yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or discussion?
I just kind of want to go back through this. So the comprehensive plan is what we view the future of the city, how the city's going to grow and what it's going to be in 20 years from now.
Yeah, it's trying to predict the future, I guess, to look towards that 2050.
Does any of us setting up here want to see our single family housing go from 89% to 74%?
Well, this is basically a roadmap in the sand that can change with the wind.
Right, but if we're agreeing to this today, we're telling people 20 years ago or 20 years from now that this is what we wanted. We wanted less single family in our city.
I can tell you from past experience involved in these for over the last 25 years that many of the plans that have been drawn up in the past, if nowhere close to being followed to what they were originally designed and recommended for the future growth in Green Valley. They're, like I said, they're just a roadmap and design to give us, this is the direction that we're wanting to go at this point with our best information. We're going to look to do these particular actions in this plan, but everything is subject to change.
But like you said, I mean, this is the path that we want the city to go. Is this the path that we want to go? Do we want to take high density multifamily and take it from 2% to 10%?
I wouldn't recommend it, but that'll be up to other boards beyond us.
We have to accept this, right? I mean, isn't that what we're voting on?
I mean, you technically no. By state statute, it's just the Planning and Zoning Commission that adopts the plan because it's a planning document and not a policy document. But historically or generally, it comes to the board as kind of a acceptance of the plan. One thing I would say too, so if you remember how this process goes in the surveys and reaching out to the public, for them to have those numbers and looking at that, it's kind of what they've heard from everybody. And then they try to piece, okay, well, where would it make the most sense if we were to do that? Reality is some of those areas are never going to develop more than likely because they're
a lot of them will stay outside city limits. I mean,
but it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe through a couple of those public meetings that we're at, that number still is like relatively high on the single family front. And the other flip side of it too that we had, and I think it was the first meeting where we had the joint one in here, when we looked at how much land is actually to be reasonably expected to be added to the city in the future, and it's not a terribly high number. And when you look at the amount of land that single family takes versus those others, they basically tried to pencil in where we could look to do that. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a developer or someone is going to have to want to come in and have a plan, and we'll have to evaluate it at that time and decide if it makes more sense than what's in here. Or, reality is when you start going to the outskirts like that, it's things that happen in between that kind of will start to more than likely guide what makes sense, I guess, on those points. But it is a guess. It's definitely not anything that's in stone. And I think when you look at where comprehensive plans are, why they're required in that's the idea of having it in the form it is versus zoning, which zoning is set in stone. Once it's that, you have to go through a process to actually change it. Whereas this, it's just supposed to be kind of a planning document using best practices at any given point when the plan is done and the public input that was put into it.
So, Chris, to a great extent, these numbers were driven by community input. So it's what our constituents are looking for. And then in addition to that, how does this compare on average nationally? Are the numbers pretty much in line?
Chris Shires, with Confluence again. So, great question. So this is a combination of public input, the steering commission, the steering committee, and the planning commission, helping us come up with those numbers. And from a kind of in comparison to other cities and nationally, whether here in Kansas City Metro or Midwest wise, you'd actually be very high on the single-family residential scale. Most cities are moving towards having more on the multifamily scale, mainly for land density, taxation, kind of the long-term financial viability. So most communities are headed towards more of a 50-50 split. And so you're not alone. There are other more suburban communities that prefer a 75-80. That not being also not typical. So anywhere from 80 to 50 to even greater than 50% multifamily is what we see.
Yeah, and I don't see our community as the 50-50. And from my conversations with my constituents, especially on the north side, for sure, we don't want to be 50-50. And, you know, Dale, you've had people in here lined up out this door saying they don't want to be 50.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I don't know how we can sit up here and tell, put this on paper saying this is what we want the city to be when it's not what we want the city to be. I don't want the city to be 50-50. I don't want the city to be 60-40. I want the city to be 80-90% single family.
I've said for a long time, anything over 25% of multifamily or rental property is setting our city up for a situation where our public is transit. They get up and move out of our community in a heartbeat and leave, a lot of stuff unoccupied and, because they don't have the roots or they own the property that they live in, they just pay rent. And so, when those situations occur, then the landlords lower the rents, and we all know where it goes after that. So having a high number of rental property can be a detriment to a community, and it also brings a lot more numbers in for the other city services like the school and the numbers there, even though right now the school's seeing a downturn in numbers, what they've seen in the past plus 4 or 5 years, they've been stagnant. So yeah, multifamily and rental property is a concern I've heard for years. I mean, people do not seem to want a lot of it. I mean, and they feel like we've got way too much now at this particular point in time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, if you just drive from here to my house in Rosewood, you'll pass all kinds of multifamily that's going up. I cannot vote in agreement with this because this is not what my constituents want. I know that for a fact. We want neighborhoods, that the community knows each other. We want Green Valley does not have to be what all the other cities are. Some cities are going 50-50. That's great. Let those cities go do that. I don't think that's the future that my constituents want for Green Valley, and there's no way that I could vote in agreement with that comprehensive plan.
Well, part of the financial reason, as they've mentioned, is single-family dwellings are only taxed at 19% of their valuation.
So are duplexes.
And there were state statutes changed about 20 years ago that duplexes and fourplexes up to, I think, a fiveplex are now taxed at the same 19% instead of 32% like a business, which basically a lot of them are business when you get right down to it. So not until you get above a fiveplex that you actually get a 32% higher income come from that particular unit as from the taxes. The advantage of the high rises and the multi-families that deals, at least they're going to pay it at the 32% of their assessed valuation on taxes into the deal, which is a fair amount more money going to be coming in. I know when I was on planning and zoning, I watched and took education in there that an open field is more advantageous to a city than a developed single-family neighborhood because of what is required to serve that particular area with fire, EMS, police, water, sewer. It doesn't pay for the services that it requires for it to be there. You'd be better off having an empty field.
was what the information provided. You correct me if I'm wrong.
No?
No?
You're right on.
So,
So would we rather have a bunch of two-plexes, three-plexes, four-plexes, or five-plexes in a huge field that doesn't pay anything, or would we rather it be single-family housing?
I'm all in favor of single-family houses. The problem is, in our community, we seem to be building nothing but 300,000 above homes, which is a very difficult starter home for anybody to buy, as you know. So the rental property is their only way in. I have a daughter who owns half of a duplex, which works out where owner occupied is great for that particular deal, and that's an avenue, kind of like to give them a way to get a way of getting some money built up and have some equity to roll into something in the future. So,
But with this comprehensive plan, it wants us to increase the high-density multifamily by 8%.
Yeah.
And only the multifamily low-density by 6%.
and I think if you took an honest deal of the people and what they want, they were very adamant with me about the property over.
Oh, I think we all heard it.
That
But that was already zoned multifamily. That's the
Well,
difference.
it
We're
was,
taking
but
land.
not at the level that you're at. They could have built duplex,
Right.
as we're talking
But
about
on this
here.
comprehensive plan, I know, because I've looked at it, we're taking land that was on the comprehensive plan, single family, and are changing it to multifamily.
Right.
And I question why we're doing that.
And it's just what they're putting there to meet the numbers that people said that they would like to see. It's not necessarily, I mean, I don't know who those people were.
Yeah, I mean, it's not
but-
my constituents, I can tell you that. I've not heard that one time.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, I'd love to have more duplexes behind my house. I've not heard that one time. I can tell you that for sure.
I agree with you there. I mean, that's the thing that comes up the strongest and loudest from the people I talk to that call me, is that they don't want to see any more.
So why are we agreeing to a plan that is telling us that? I mean, we're only going to be on this board for so long. You know, my term's up in April, and
And it
you know,
does send a mixed message to people in the future that's going to be replacing
yeah,
us.
because we're the ones agreeing to this,
Right.
saying if the planning and zoning committee wants to put this forward, let them put that forward. But we as the board who are elected, the last time I checked, planning and zoning is not elected. I'm elected, and my constituents, they don't want this. 100%. I can guarantee you, if I went and talked to 10 residents in my neighborhood and I said, hey, do you want multifamily behind your house? Not one of them's going to say yes. Not going to happen.
Can't
So
disagree.
why are we agreeing to this?
I don't know as we are yet. We haven't voted.
Well, but my question is, it's like, well, we've always just went and did it. You know, that's what you said starting out. And it's like, why? I don't agree with it. There's zero chance I could vote for this.
And I agree. I believe that as we grow, we will need a few more apartments, but not 10%. Not at 10%.
Oh, it's more than 10%. We're going
Right.
from 89% to 74%.
Well, 2% plus 8, that's what they're saying, 8% up to 10%. That's my thing. That's too much for me to agree with.
Yeah, there's
So,
no way.
So what impact would a reduced population for single family across the board versus the 8 or 10% for multifamily have on bringing in commercial, which is going to drive tax revenue? Are the businesses going to want to come, or the restaurants going to want to come if you don't have the population to support them? I mean, if we're losing, in an apartment complex per acre, you have way more people. In duplexes, you have double the people. That's going to be double the revenue for the businesses coming to town. That's going to be missing
Actually,
if we don't do this.
the duplexes and fourplexes and fiveplexes are harder on the community because they don't pay the higher taxes of the multifamily high rise.
What I'm getting at though is we need the population to
Yes.
support the retail, to
Yes.
support the business, which does bring in the higher tax revenue.
Yes, you're very, very correct there. That's been the I-70 interchange, and the fact that our population wasn't high enough. And anytime I've talked to restaurants outside the community to come to Green Valley, they've said, yeah, we've done studies, but you don't have enough daytime lunch business to keep these, to make it profitable. Weekends and Fridays and whatever is exceptional, but, they got to look at the entire week and covering their cost of operations and stuff. We've grown to the point from when I was talking to them, a lot of them from 6, 7, 8,000 to now we're at 15,000, and we're seeing some change of that. Gulliver's over there invested almost over $5 million for that facility. I spoke to the gentleman over there. That's a huge investment in brick and mortar to put down a business in this community and take a chance on it. And you go right down the road, all them people have invested a lot of money, so they're putting a lot on the line if they think we're going the right direction and getting enough population. As our question is do we want that population to be a transit population that can come in and leave, live in apartments and leave easily and move on for whatever reason and leave us with an empty structure or whatever. It will possibly, as the community grows, a higher number of apartments may be necessary, but as the city gets bigger, that 8 or 10% is going to be a heck of a lot larger number of apartments with the city itself growing. I mean, when you the total overall number, when you compare it in percentages, it's kind of a little bit skewing on things. Somebody said COVID went up 100% at a hospital. They had 2 patients one day, had 4 the next. It's a 100% increase. So
I mean,
statistics are one of those things that's hard to.
In the restaurants, like you said, I mean, the restaurants are coming in at us having an 89% single family. So why change? That's what I'm confused about. Is why
Our higher emphasis should be on businesses and so forth. As our
Agreed.
industrial park grows and so forth, they're going to pay the lion's shares of the taxes because they're high dollar value.
I think the
properties and
ward
stuff.
sitting here and said that they had a figure when they were in here. We were doing all that about how much they pay in taxes a year, and it's insane. Way more than any multifamily housing is going to do.
Between their property on their property deals and their personal property equipment and so forth in their buildings and so forth. And we need to be more frugal when we discuss NIDs and SIDs and TIFs and other things for these to come in because that takes them off the tax rolls. Did bond 100s or 200s or whatever it's called when we're taking actual locations that we're paying taxes completely off the tax rolls that affected not only ourselves but the school district and other entities around. So those are big issues that need to be looked at it in a bigger picture as to over the next 20 years, well, this business is not paying any taxes and they're getting what taxes they do pay come right back to them to help pay for something. It's something we have to look at as we move along. Some cities have just gone too far with their TIFs and so forth. And Independence is a good example. They put a TIF up there on the Bass Pro, and the rest of the development didn't come in, and they had to start cutting the services because they had to pay the debt out of the operational budget for the community. And so that was a significant issue for them, not seeing the whole picture. We have these specialists come in and tell us what they foresee and project are going to come in, but we can't take them at 100% because we're the ones carrying the load. We're the ones going to be looked at why we voted and let this happen and are taking stuff away from the people. So it's, sometimes we just can't necessarily completely buy in 100% to everything we hear.
Well, the last thing I'll say on this, there's no way that I can look at my constituents and say that I agreed to lowering single family by 16%, increasing low density multifamily by 6%, increasing high density multifamily by 8%. There's no way that I could explain that to my constituents at all.
Any additional discussion, questions?
Just to reiterate before we wrap up here, this is a soft plan. We're not setting anything in stone. All of these land use categories are modifiable through zoning to be either multifamily. There's a compatibility matrix. They can move to be whatever the city needs to be as the city grows. We're not setting anything in stone here.
But we're agreeing to what planning and zoning has said that they want
But
the
if we-
path for the city.
I agree with what you're saying, but if we set it all to be single family and it's compatible on the matrix to multifamily,
Sure, yeah.
it could still end up the
Agree,
same way.
agree, 100%, yeah, agree.
So we
That'd
gotta
be
have
fine.
some sort of target, and a target of
Fine,
no
just voted on.
multifamily or low, it doesn't make sense financially for the city, I believe. I think we need that tax revenue. We need the starter homes for young families. And as far as it being transient, you gotta get people in here so they can set up roots. If we don't have them coming in and setting up roots, Green Valley will die.
I
mean, that's just,
I agree.
no one
And if
moves
we
to
look-
Lexington, Missouri.
I agree.
Lexington, Missouri is dying because it's not a growing city. We have to have that growth.
No, I agree with you. And if we look around, I think we're seeing a lot of multifamily going up. I mean, we're seeing it happen, and we're still maintaining 89% single family and doing that. And I just don't know why we go away from that. I mean, we have a lot of multifamily. It seems to me that we have a lot of multifamily, and and we're able to maintain that at 89% single family. I just don't see why we change course. And I don't want to keep harping on that.
I would say one of the additions that we have not had in the plans in the past to try to give a little more clarity or show what flexibility is in the plan is the matrix that he talked about. That's something that hasn't existed in the past, and it's kind of been like, well, it shows it as this, and that's it. There's no, then you come in and everything's kind of up for debate, discussion, whatever, every time a plan comes forward. So that was part of the idea of having that, was to show, like, yeah, it's this, but these things could or may make sense as well.
I'm glad we had it. I mean, it's obviously started up some discussion, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? All right, seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Just Mr. Bray for aye.
Yeah. All right, next item is resolution R 23-65. It's a resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley authorizing the city administrator to execute task agreement number 2023-4 with Crawford Murphy and Tilly Incorporated for design of the Northeast Sewer Interceptor and Pump Station, subject to all provisions, including the on-call professional engineering services agreements.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number R 23-65.
I got a motion by Alderman Skinner to approve resolution R 23-65. Do I have a second? Second, Alderman Arnold. Any discussion?
Mayor and members of the board, if you remember, we went through for the budget process for 2023, one of the things we talked about was how to use some of the recovery fund dollars. And as we just talked about with the comp plan, it's trying to look forward and do what we can to do our part to help growth. And if you remember years ago at this point, one of the big things that kind of spurred the Rosewood and Woodbury development was the sewer interceptor line. That kind of made that main trunk line through there. And then ultimately, after it was designed and constructed, there was a fee that was associated with it, where anybody that comes in and develops pays a per acre fee. We're not to that point yet. What we're wanting to do is, we know we have the area kind of on the northeast side of town. And the biggest, in talking with developers and just what we know, the biggest hurdle to that is sewering the land. That's the biggest cost. That's the biggest obstacle. So what we had talked about at budget time was going forward with the design of what that sewer line and pump station would be. And then after that design period, that's where we could get into the construction side of it on that cost, and then what kind of program we'd want to put in place to try to recoup some of that money. So in essence, it's the start of a plan to, we know it's a need. This is a way to try to help spur development, because as we talked about, we don't have a lot of land that's just laying around that's just perfect for development at this point. Pretty much all of it has some sort of weakness one way or the other, and in this area, it is the sewer side of it. So this resolution would essentially just agree to that contract with our on-call engineer to do that design process for the sewer line and pump stations.
Have any questions, discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. 5-0. Next up, resolution R 23-66. A resolution by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Grand Valley, Missouri, to enter into a contract with Shawnee LED for the installation of electronic digital sign.
Mayor, I move that we approve resolution R 23-66.
Got a motion, Alderman Arnold, to approve resolution R 23-66. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Bray. Any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, this is another item that we discussed during budget time, but this would be putting the digital message board sign out here just south of City Hall, replacing the old sign where you go out and put the letters in every time to make a change. With this, the bid actually did come in lower than what we had budgeted, and I should have said that on the last resolution. That design cost was significantly less than what we had budgeted for or planned on, so both of those are in good shape on that front. But we did receive 7 bids on that. We did have a couple that were lower than what we were going with, but they did not meet the criteria that we had set out in the proposal. So we are asking to go forward with Shawnee LED to get that process moving.
What's the size of this again?
Yep. Shannon, you want to help me out?
4 by 8.
The board itself is 4 by 8.
4 foot by 8 foot?
Yeah.
4 high, 8 wide, and then it'll have a base that's 2 high and 10 wide.
Yep. So it'd be
You'll get a good picture then. You're not gonna
Yeah.
be some little,
Yeah.
as you drive by and barely,
Yeah.
okay.
So it'll be the base, the sign, and then above it, like a permanent sign that will have the
Yeah.
city logo or something like that on it.
Do you know off the top of your head what the resolution is? Is it?
Yeah, so like the pixel pitch. Yeah. So it's 6 millimeter pixel pitch, which is one of the better ones that was quoted.
Yeah,
to
from a
us.
distance, that looks
Yeah.
good.
What's the projected completion date?
Well, ultimately, they said that they could get it done within probably a month, month and a half. And so they said basically before we hit the end of November, should be installed and operational.
And it's my understanding we're using COVID relief money for this. Does this meet all the criteria that's acceptable for the use of that funding?
Yeah, so if you remember, one of the changes that was made to that was you could basically take a 10% loss, essentially, use it for any city purchases or normal city purchases. So with that round of money, they lowered the threshold of what it could be used for. The first go around, there was a lot more restrictions on what it could and couldn't be used for.
I know they've been, State's Attorney General is gonna be looking into that.
It is. So we had, yeah, I mean, you still have to go through and account for everything. And that's something that Stephen works
Make
with.
sure we're good there. Thank you.
Yeah,
for
we
keeping
did,
an eye on that.
it was a revenue replacement. They did a national average, and we chose to take that as a part of the ARPA funds. And this basically, it can be used for a much wider variety of projects, including this one. We've, in the past, I think we ran our list by our financial advisor, who's like an expert on some of the ARPA guidelines.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. 5-0. That's it for resolutions. Up next are ordinances.
The first ordinance is Bill number B23-30. This is an ordinance of the City of Green Valley amending the city code regarding marijuana.
Mayor, I move that we accept Bill 2330 for its first read and bring it back for its second reading by title only.
I have a motion from Alderman Arnold to approve Bill 23-30 for its first reading, bring it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Skinner. Any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, so there's two parts to the change when they went from recreational or medical marijuana to recreational marijuana. What we had earlier was the public hearing on the zoning side. This is the offense side, so this would be the stuff more that Chief is dealing with, but it's the same type thing. It's basically going through and making sure that our language and our code matches what the new state law is.
Any questions, discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. 5-0 is first.
Then next is Bill number B23-31. This is an ordinance by the Board of Aldermen of the City of Green Valley, Missouri, to amend the City Code Title 4, Chapter 425, to remove medical marijuana facilities and replace it with comprehensive marijuana facilities.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we set Bill 2331, bring it back by title only at our next meeting.
Okay, I have a motion from Alderman Bray to approve Bill B23-31 for its first reading, bringing it back by title only for its second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Arnold. Any discussion?
Mayor, members of the board, this is the ordinance that goes with the public hearing that we had earlier for the zoning side.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. 5-0 first. That's it for ordinances. Next up is city attorney's reports.
Me filling in for Joe tonight.
All right. All right, next up, city administrator and staff reports.
Yep, we had written reports from PD and community development, and then Shannon.
Mayor and board, just an update, our fall youth baseball softball program is kicked off. Our games actually start next week. They'll run next week, probably through the middle to end of October, depending on weather. We usually always give a report in the spring and the fall with our youth baseball, softball numbers. Generally, the spring season is the bigger season. We had just short of 600 kids registered in the spring. In the fall, we are competing with football and a lot of the other fall sports. But we have 335 kids registered for youth baseball and softball this year.
That was it.
That's it. All right. Next up is Board of Alderman reports and comments. Alderman Arnold.
I'd just like to take a moment to recognize those from 9/11 and all the individuals and citizens that were killed during that event, and that recognize the 343 firefighters that perished on that day trying to serve their community. It definitely is a day that touches everyone in professional service, because there were a number of Port Authority police officers there that day that were also taken in that day, and that, you know, sometimes I don't think they get near the respect and recognition that they should, as well as the firemen on that. I'd also like to say that I was going to publicly congratulate and tell Miss Earn that she did a great job with the parade, that it was very well put together, ran really smooth, and disappointed that she took my comments wrong.
Alderman Bray.
I have nothing this evening.
Alderman Skinner.
Just a quick question for Mr. Davies. When was the inclusive playground? What are the construction dates on that again? I had some.
Yeah, so that actually came up in our department head meeting this morning.
Oh, okay.
So we're in the process of signing and completing the contract with Cunningham. They've given us a 10 to 12-week lead time for the materials.
Okay.
That coupled with the fact the last step of the playground project would be the surface material, which is a poured-in-place rubber surface material, which has very specific temperature requirements.
I'm sure. Okay.
It's not ideal during winter months. So right now, we're looking at a completion of by March of next year.
Okay. Well, the person who asked me was my wife, because we're having our kid's birthday party there, so
Okay.
I had to get back
What
to her.
date was that?
The 24th of this month. So I think we're good.
Well, we're gonna make sure that we don't remove the existing playground equipment
Till the
we have a
25th. Right.
definitive. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And the other thing was just my observations Friday night. So I went to the Grand Valley football game, which we lost, and that was bad, but it was a great game. It was totally, I don't think we sell out high school sports, but it was, you could not find a seat. I mean, it was nuts. And then as we're leaving and coming down, Main Street, every parking spot in the city was jam-packed. Why am I drawing a blank? The fair, thank you. The fair was just, it was crazy. I mean, people just walking back and forth between the restaurants downtown and the fair. I just thought it was great. And then I went to the fair on Saturday and we had a great time. It was just fun to see the city, just that many people out and about. A football game competing against the fair and both just being totally packed. It was really cool to see. So thanks to everybody who helped out with that stuff. That's all.
Alderman Knox.
I'd like to address Corey's concern on the parade. Being the vice president of a historical society with 20,000 members worldwide, we have a convention the end of May, 1st of June every year. We move it around the country, and we have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,700 antique semi trucks come in. On our committee, on the show committee, there's 10 or 15 of us with the least experience on there being probably 10 years. You would think with that much experience and that much organization that every year we knew exactly what we were going to do. And somehow or another, we mess up, whether it's forgetting to get an ice vendor, getting to the show, not having the registration computer on site. It's always something. So for her to take the hit that she took on one little misstep, and only doing it for 3 years, I think is pretty harsh. And I want to publicly thank her for what she's done, and I believe that we as a board should reach out to her and ask her to continue with our support.
Alderman Cleaver?
Chief, thanks for the report.
Yes, thank you.
That's all I have.
Next up then is mayor's report. I think as everyone knows, I devote a lot to the fair, and so a lot of people, and I just want to, we could not do it without support from the PD, and I'm sure Officer Stat probably got all the fare he wanted this weekend out there, and from all the PD helping with the parade. All the Parks and Rec employees, I don't know if Jerry hated me by the end this year or not, but I think usually he hates me there a couple days a year, and these are the days. And, Public Works employees, putting barricades out, and then they're always bringing up the rear of the parade, picking all the barricades up. So, all the city employees came over, the float and all that. So, we couldn't do it without all the volunteers. I'm like Alderman Knox, I feel bad about the hit that Corey took on that thing. I mean, I was on the email chain. I saw the emails going back between ROTC and her. Man, I think this is missed. ROTC, this is like their, I believe, second leader in the last year. So the person who ran it last year, they've had 2 leaders since then. I don't know if they just forgot them or what, and I don't think anyone really necessarily. I mean, everyone is so busy that day. I don't know if anyone even noticed it. I mean, unfortunately, before it left, I can tell you, I organized the parade once. I can't do it again. It's a lot of work. That's why so many different organizations and people have done it over the years, because it's so much. So I don't know if it's will reconsider or not, but I sure hope so, because if not, we'll be looking for somebody else to do it next year, and it's a lot. So I don't know who.
I did a car show and that was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. So from people, the parade's on Saturday. People calling on, because I was getting calls while I was painting stripes on Thursday. People, hey, I want, we will be in the parade. And, most of them are local businesses or local, youth activities, and we're not going to, we don't want to turn anybody away. So, we're still trying to, I mean, the lineup is done, a week ahead of time, but you're still adding people to it because, you don't want to turn a business away who wants to promote their business in Grand Valley, or a kid's football team or baseball team or whatever. So it's a lot of work. I feel bad for the, hit she took on that. So hopefully we'll be able to get it to next year, and we're already in the works with some ideas to hopefully, make it even better next year. So back to the fair. I mean, I don't have any record going back, and it's hard to tell how many people really attend those events, but I think it's probably a safe bet to say probably had the highest attendance that any fair's ever had. We ran out of pretty much everything and had to go get more, and that was before it even got halfway late. So again, I want to thank everybody that came out, everybody participated. We're already talking about what we're going to do better next year, so we'll see how it goes. So that is all I have. I believe we do have a need for a short.
I'd like to act on what Mr. Knox has stated, that we send her, I'd make a motion that we send her a vote of full confidence that she did a good job and appreciation for the service she has given.
I got a motion from Alderman Arnold, second by Alderman Knox. Any discussion? All in favor of sending that to her, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, we'll get that together, and I will make sure to sign in on our behalf.
We're going to do something anyway, but
yeah, we'll get something to her officially. Do we have a need for a short executive session for this one issue, right?
Yep, one legal.
For legal, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn an executive session.
So moved.
Alderman Skinner, do I have a second?
Second.
Right.
Tonight.
All right, any discussion? Any roll call?
Alderman Arnold?
Yes.
Alderman Bray? Alderman Knox? Alderman Mills? I'm sorry, and Alderman Skinner.
Yes.
And I missed Mr. Kleber.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, we'll adjourn the executive session.
Everything else?
Yeah.